At least one person died, 18 were injured, and 26 others were arrested after a new episode of police repression in the region of Apurimac, Dina Boluarte's homeland. U.S. President Joe Biden received his Brazilian counterpart Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva at the White House on Friday. Syria and Turkey continue to receive international solidarity to address the emergency after Monday's devastating earthquake, while the death toll now surpassed 23,700. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Ana Marrero from the teleSUR headquarters in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin with the news. Stay with us. In Peru, at least one person died, 18 were injured, and 26 others were arrested after a new episode of police repression in the region of Apurimac, Dina Boluarte's homeland. According to the preliminary report, a group of citizens who were mobilizing in the district of Chalahuancar in Apurimac were brutally intervened by agents of the National Police with tear gas, bombs, and backshot. Human rights organizations denounced the detention of more than 80 people during the mobilizations. Likewise, social movements reiterated their demand for the resignation of Dina Boluarte, the closure of the Congress, the convocation of a constituent assembly, and the liberation of Pedro Castillo. Meanwhile, the Peruvian Congress has denounced the indicted former President Martin Vizcarra on corruption charges. The motion passed Thursday afternoon with 102 votes in favor and 8 abstentions. Former President Martin Vizcarra and other former ministers, including Maria Antonieta Alba and Maria Inostroza, have been charged with collusion against the public administration for the crimes of omission, refusal, or delay of executing their functions. Vizcarra, Inostroza, and Alba are considered jointly responsible for non-purchasing molecular tests to detect COVID-19 in the year 2020 and instead opting for rapid tests, which led to loss of lives, violating the fundamental rights to the life, physical, moral, and physiological integrity of the population. The director of the National Electoral Council in the Ecuadorian province of Guayas, John Gamboa, denied the possibility of fraud in the region during the scrutiny of last Sunday's elections. Gamboa responds to the accusations of the Vice President of the National Electoral Council, Enrique Pita, about a presumed parallel computing center that printed false referendum reports. Gamboa assured that Pita's accusations are politically motivated. However, he acknowledged that there were 27,200 minutes with numerical inconsistencies and due to the pressure of the electoral body and other state functions to complete the counting process, the filling of the tally sheets were modified. Colombia's High Commissioner for Peace, Danilo Rueda, confirmed on Friday that the second cycle of talks between the Colombian government and the National Liberation Army will begin next Monday in Mexico. According to the information, the two issues to be discussed in this new phase are the ceasefire and the mechanism for the participation of society in the construction of peace in Colombia. Interviewed by the presidential press secretary, Rueda emphasized that for the executive, the rights of the victims are not negotiable. He points out that this new stage implies a scenario of conversations that will allow to know which is the bill the government will present in Congress to dismantle the armed groups and to facilitate a process of collective incorporation with transformations in the neighborhoods, ensuring and protecting the rights of the victims. U.S. President Joe Biden received his Brazilian counterpart, Luis Ignacio Lula da Silva, at the White House this Friday. The visit responds to an invitation extended to him by Biden in early January during a phone conversation they held after a violent attack by Bolsonaro followers on the Planalto Palace at the Congress and the Supreme Court in Brasilia. Prior to his meeting with Biden on Friday, Lula had a meeting with Senator Bernie Sanders and an audience with the Democratic Party legislators, among other activities. The delegation accompanying Lula includes the Secretaries of Foreign Affairs, Economy, Environment, and Racial Equality. Let's take a very short break now, but remember, you can now follow us on our TikTok account as teleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and more. Stay tuned for more news. Welcome back to From the South. Syria and Turkey continue to receive international solidarity to address the emergency after the devastating earthquake. The number of deaths in both countries has climbed to more than 23,700, according to the latest figures from authorities and rescue organizations. World Health Organization Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus said the organization sent experts teams and special flights with medical supplies to both nations. Meanwhile, rescue teams continue to search for thousands of people suspected of being trapped in rubble, but optimism is finding over the freezing temperatures and the 72 hours deadline that is considered crucial to save life. A team of rescue workers from the Red Cross Society of China handed over the first batch of medical supplies to Syria upon their arrival in the quake-hit country. The Chinese team also met with representatives from the Syrian Red Crescent and explored the best search and rescue solutions. Like many rescue teams, the members of the Red Cross Society of China landed in Syria after a massive earthquake hit southern Turkey on Monday, followed by another turmoil of a similar strength, which struck later in the day, while thousands of aftershocks continued throughout the day. The first United Nations aid convoy for earthquake victims arrived on Friday at Abad Halaba border crossing in northwestern Syria. The aid came as rescued sources debris in a desperate search for survivors 4 days after the earthquake hit Turkey and Syria, killing more than 23,700 people. But chances of finding survivors have dismissed in the passing of the 3-day mark that experts consider a crucial period to save life. Meanwhile, the United States Agency for International Development also sent an aid package to the affected areas. For its part, the Syrian government stated Friday that the decision issued by the U.S. on the partial and temporary freezing of some unilateral coercive measures imposed on the Arab country where the misleading lies. According to the National Foreign Ministry, the U.S. decision copies other previous measures that only seeks to give a false humanitarian appearance by stipulating supposed exceptionism for humanitarian purposes, but the facts prove otherwise. Damascus urged Washington to immediately, unhastily, unconditionally, and without exception end its blockade and to desist from the hostile practices and violations of international law and the principles and purposes of the Charter of the United Nations. In Brazil, preliminary satellite data released on Friday seems to indicate that the Amazon deforestation fell in January 2023 from the same month last year. Preliminary satellite data collected by the government's space research agency INPED shows 64 square miles cleared in the region, down 61% from January 2022, the worst from the month in an 80-year series. However, experts said it is too early to talk about a trend reversal. Still, in the mid-January, Brazilian environmental agents launched their first annual looting raid under Lula, who has pledged to end certain environmental destruction and is also fighting wildcat mining on Yanomami land in the Amazon, its largest in illegal gold mining. Belgian police has arrested Social Democrat European Parliament member Marc Tarabella as part of an investigation into an alleged corruption case involving Qatar, Morocco, and the European Parliament. Sources from the Belgian Federal Prosecutor's Office reported that they executed a raid to inspect a safe belonging to the 59-year-old Marc Tarabella. The judges investigating the case will be determining whether Tarabella must appear before her or not. Also, the European Parliament suspended the preliminary immunity of Italian Andrea Cosolino at the request of investigators. We have more news coming up after our financial break, so don't go away. Welcome back. The Prime Minister of Moldavia, Natalia Gabrielita, announced on Friday her resignation, which implies the automatic resignation of the entire cabinet. After a year and a half at the head of her country's government, she communicated the end of her mandate. Moldova is going through great difficulties due to the current Ukrainian crisis, which has severely affected its energy infrastructure. The resignation of her government was also demanded by the opposition, which accuses Gabrielita's executive of failing to negotiate better agreements with energy supplying countries. U.S. Government Communications Director Kate Bedingfield will leave her post at the end of this month, an official statement announced on Friday. Bedingfield, who has served as assistant to President Joe Biden since his time as a vice president, will be replaced by Ben Labul, a former press officer in the Barack Obama's administration. Regarding her resignation, Biden said in a statement that Kate has been a long trust advisor through thick and thin. Regarding the new director, he said that he hopes to welcome him as a top-notch communicator. The White House has signed that Labul will become the first openly gay person to hold the position of communications director. Former U.S. President Donald Trump is back on Facebook and on Instagram platforms from which he was suspended from inciting violence. On Thursday, the conglomerate Meta, owner of those social networks, restored his account in virtual spaces. Earlier, Facebook communicated that it will return the official pages of the former president, but said the process will take a few weeks to be able to install guardrail on Trump's account that could result in it being suspended again if it violates the group's rules. Let's remember that the former head of state was restricted from social networks in the wake of riots on January 6, 2021, when hundreds of his supporters stormed the federal Capitol to stop the certification of Joe Biden's victory in November 2020 elections. China said on Friday that it will work with other members of the BRIC group to analyze and accelerate the admission of new members to the bloc. The Foreign Ministry said the expansion process will be based on in-depth discussions and consensus, building through consultations among the other members of the BRIC: Brazil, Russia, India, and South Africa. BRICS agreed, and it is the 14th presidential summit to examine requests from countries willing to join its roster, and official sources said that at least 13 territories in the world want to take this step. The president of Sierra Leone, Julius Maada, said education is a priority for his government. His administration has allocated 22% of the country's budget for this purpose. Maada is running for re-election next June the 24th.
We have provided access for every child to go to school. We do not want any child to fall along the way. And what we have done is to make sure that every child, whether pregnant or not, whether you are in the farthest of places, whether you are rich or poor, we are able to provide you with the service. Well, we have increased the pay and conditions of service for teachers, and there is more to come, but we have just spread it over a period of time. The teachers are much better today. We have increased the number of teachers, and we can only do as much as our budget can permit us to do.
And we have come to the end of this news brief, but you can find these and many other stories on our website.